Let's jump into the news.
The news.
What better way to start than to start by talking about smog? City government announced a couple of weeks ago that this upcoming smog season, let's call it, also known as winter.
Heat season.
We're going to have heating season, yeah. We're going to have free transport on public communication on the days when the smog passes certain levels of smogginess, right?
What do I get? A tax break? I got a card already.
Remember last year on certain days, they would announce it like 12 hours before that if you were a driver, you had a car and you had your car registration, instead of having a ticket, you could show your car registration and ride for free. Well, now it's been expanded to all of us with or without a car. Big news, Care. It's going to help you.
Ride the tram when it's smoggy.
Are you going to be more likely to take the tram to replace the car that you don't have, Josh?
I think I take the tram only when the weather's too foul to ride a bicycle.
Is this going to make any difference to the smog? Is this going to make the one tiny bit of difference to how much smog?
Well, no, it's just showing that how much the city cares, isn't it? It's a public relations exercise.
It's a bit of a plaster, all right. It's not a real solution, which would be difficult to implement and expensive.
Yeah, I'll be glad to take the free tram ride myself, but let's be honest. I mean, this is distracting from the real cause of smog. It's not the cars, people. You could take every car off the road, and it would put maybe a 5% dent in the smog. That's not the problem. The problem is people burning trash and burning, wood and stuff in their old school furnaces in houses in the countryside. Yeah, isn't that?
Yeah, and the particular sort of like the geographical nature of the area, and the fact that foul air tends to linger rather than getting blown away.
Yeah, why don't they do something about the fact that we're in a geographical depression? Why can't they do something about that?
Well, speak to people in Los Angeles.
Start filling in the holes or something like that.
Well, look, gas is the answer. There should be a massive push on tax incentivizing installations of gas boilers. That's the future. Central heated water, from a gas boiler is so much cleaner. Condensing boiler just blows basically water vapor out of the side of its flue.
We're going to see the announcement about
side of its flue. Sorry, Dad.
We're going to be conflicted. We're going to see heavy smog predicted this week, and we're going to get excited in a positive way because we're going to get free tram rides.
Yeah.
So we're going to associate smog with free stuff.
I go back to I already have a tram card. What about us poor souls who pay a monthly fee? Do we get
lobby the city government for some kind of rebate at the end of the year?
I'll see us on the tram.
Let's move on. Last week has also seen another wave of attacks in international media on the Polish government in the context of recent changes made to the judicial system. Dave, tell us about, I know you get excited about this. There are certain publications in particular that get your goat.
It's just the basic legwork journalistically isn't done in any of these articles. If someone's reading The Guardian, they're not getting the full picture, because I find it very hard to find in English anywhere, an exact layout of what's being proposed, why it's so terrible. And mainly, I'm always trying to get to the bottom of, is there any truth to Peace's claim that the lustration process didn't really apply to the courts after the fall of communism, that it is stacked with a lot of ex-communist judges. And that's what confuses me deeply. Are you referring to the article in the Chicago Tribune?
Yeah, among others, yes.
Yeah, I was interested to see the reply to that from the Polish Prime Minister. Did you see that?
Yeah, he did. He wrote actually what I thought was a pretty convincing rebuttal to the article.
Just for context, because I'm sure people have heard about this and, like myself, found it hard to get the kind of detail on it that you would expect if you're reading about the news in your own country, like Ireland or England. Just read his response there, Josh. That we got this from Radio Poland.
Okay, yeah. Communist-era judges. In the so-called roundtable talks of 1989 between Poland's communists and the democratic opposition, then-President General Wojciech Jaruzelski, the man who ran Poland's martial law government for the Soviets, was allowed to nominate an entirely new bench of communist-era judges to staff the post-communist courts. These judges dominated our judiciary for the next quarter century. Some remain in place, Morawiecki said. To this day, he added, an elite council of 25, dominated by 15 judges in the appellate level or above, nominates all judges including their own successors. Now, that's important, I think. No trial judge or elected official participates. The president may accept or reject the nominees. The system lends itself to nepotism and corruption.
And today they passed a law, isn't it correct, that now anyone who applies to the Supreme Court will be given a lifetime university salary. They're trying to encourage people to come forward because the judges' union are against the new changes, and they're worried they won't have anyone to fill the positions that are going to be freed up by the age change.
I don't know. It's become so hyper politicized now. It's kind of hard to tell.
Yeah, that's my problem. I can't see the wood from the trees. I don't particularly like peace and a lot of their policies and a lot of the way they throw meat to their base. Certain things they brought in have really annoyed me. But I find this a very important issue, isn't it? Because this was central to their mandate for getting elected with the first overall majority in the Polish parliament since the fall of communism. So we need to get to the bottom of whether there's any validity to the claims that this needs to be done. Where's the truth in this? We need an expert, John. I've said it to you before. We need someone on here.
What do you make of the steady drumbeat again in the Western media, Western European media, North American media? It's, anytime there's a story about Poland in the news, you already know what it's going to be about. They're going to, we're under some nationalist right-wing government. The dark night of fascism is just around the corner.
Hyperbole all over the shop. No clear explanations.
Foreigners living in Poland are, we're kind of cringing in fear and keeping the lights out lest we be discovered by the secret police. It's ridiculous.
Comparisons.
I can't take it seriously anymore.
Have to have a comparison to Hungary every two paragraphs. Occasionally, I've even seen Turkey and Erdogan. That's quite a leap. Yeah,
that's a nice one.
The Islamicization of Poland.
Let's get a little more specific here. The issue that a lot of these media pieces are pointing to is the fact that not too long ago, Andrzej Duda, and actually the peace government really, forced, I'm not sure what word to use, the retirement of a good chunk of the judges at the highest level courts in Warsaw, including the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. And this is seen by many as an abuse of executive power. So basically he says, you're retired, hit the beach, the golf course, whatever you people do when you're retired from being a judge, we're going to replace you. And again, this is seen as stepping way over the line by some people. It got really complicated and interesting when the Chief Justice, her name is Małgorzata Gersdorf, she says, no, I'm going to go back to work because the Constitution says that I am appointed for the 6-year term, which expires in 2020. I'm going back. There's nothing you can do about it. It's in the Constitution. If you want to fire me, you're breaking the Constitution. So who's right? The executive branch says, okay, we're going to replace you and you have to go when we tell you to, or the judicial branch who says, no, that's an abuse of power. I don't know. Is there an answer to this question?
Well, I would have thought it would sit in whatever the wording is the Constitution is, because, generally speaking...
it's vague on this point.
It is, right, because, as typified by the American Constitution, you have a clear separation of powers between the executive, the legislative, and the judiciary. And the judiciary could argue that if the executive or the legislative is trying to override the Constitution by firing members of the judiciary, then that is extra constitutional behaviour. If, on the other hand, it is within the remit of the executive to hire and fire the judiciary. But this is the proposed constitutional change in a nutshell, isn't it? Is that the executive does have this power, but can it apply retroactively?
I find it interesting that when the executive branch tells a judge, you're fired, we're going to, you're retiring, we're going to replace you. Suddenly it's an attack on democracy and people take to the streets. And again, that dark night of fascism just around the corner. But when the judicial branch tells the executive branch to go fuck itself, nobody cares. So,
right, because
that's seen as independence and separation.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Despite the fact that judiciary is not elected, is not.
One of the, just to bring it back to another point for me is the issue really is, and it's very hard for me to say one way or the other, is how is the judiciary performed in terms of low levels of corruption, in terms of good judgments, in terms of applying the law of this country correctly. I can't sit here and tell you that I can say how they've done. And I'd love to have someone on the show who could tell me how the Polish courts have performed in relation to other EU member states.
I unfortunately have some extensive experience on this subject, and I can just say from my own perspective that it's a mess, it's a disaster. But it does raise the interesting question of how do you or can you even quantify the performance of a judicial system in Poland and anywhere. You know, you can look at a hospital and you can measure their stats and see if they're doing a good job. You can look at the police, you can look at other government agencies, but how do you look at a court and measure how good of a job they're doing?
Well, I think a lot of the international metrics are actually how independent they are. That's one of the main things they look at, which is why it's kind of alarmed people around the world. But another problem for me is the massive variety of ways different parliaments and different governments around the world nominate and elect
there are
judges.
any number of ways to
It's
do it.
so complicated because, you know, we think we know and then we kind of realize it's maybe you know in your own country and one other. But, you know, there are a lot of, you know, that's their argument that, you know, this is the way it's done in many places. We're just bringing it up to best practice. But there's a suspicion because it's peace that there's something a lot darker at play here.
Exactly.
And I just don't know how to get to the bottom of it because, you know,
no matter what
I'm not a
system
legal
it is,
scholar.
no matter what process is used to appoint and install judges, you can always take some angle that it's politically motivated, politically fixed to help the party in power. You can always make that argument in any country, I think. There's no perfect way, right? So I just think we're seeing this storm of controversy because it's a peace government that the left doesn't like, that much of the media doesn't like, the Polish media, much of the Western media doesn't like, and so that's why we're seeing what we're seeing.
Mm-hmm. I'm not willing to make that declarative of a remark. I'll just say that I'd like to know more. You know, I think I'd love to have on a couple of legal experts if anyone's listening out there.
Oh, by the way, is there any irony?
I'd love to have a debate between two legal scholars from either side. I think that would be fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any irony in the fact that the people who are insisting on, you know, accountability to the people and constitutional government are the same people who are extremely pro-European Union? Is there any irony in that fact? It seems to me that there is.
Not to me. Let's not go back down this road. We've done this before. You know, you seem to think that being a member of the EU means you have no control of your own
and you're a
parliament.
European Union fan. You can't be. Sorry, you can't.
What else you got in your news bag? What else you got in your news bag?
I think I'm going to just stay away from that one. You know my position.
Come on, bring it on.
We literally spoke about this on another show.
Yeah, we did. But again, it just comes up in so many things. And I think this is a good example.
Well, no, it's a great example. But I think I'm going to keep my powder dry until the appropriate opportunity.
Thank you, Josh. Moving on. Now, this is a subject. I've been thinking about this. I don't know how to introduce it. And I also don't know if it's clear, cut and dried, easy to take aside, or if it's really messy and complicated. I think you can make a strong case for both. The subject came up because of an article in The Guardian. We've been talking about the Western press, The Guardian. Now, when you say The Guardian, a lot of people's antenna immediately go up. A lot of people get instantly angry. A lot of other people get ready to defend. Josh, Dave, anybody who wants to wade into this, for the benefit of anyone listening who doesn't know, give us some context on where The Guardian is coming from politically.
Well, traditionally, The Guardian has been considered a liberal newspaper in Great Britain, and as the meaning of the word liberal has changed over the years, so has The Guardian. So really, it's considered to be the serious paper of the intelligent left. Of course, there's considerable infighting between different strengths of leftiness as to whether it is left or whether it's really central, or even some would argue it's right of centre. But anyway, it seems to take, shall we say, a kind of educated liberal view.
The consensus is that it's left of centre, perhaps even very left of centre.
Of course, it depends to a large extent who's writing. I mean, they've had people writing there who are actually Communist Party members. They've also had people.
There's a lot of good stuff on it too.
Yeah, no. I mean, it's not to criticise it outright. And I mean, there is a spectrum of writers, and there are people who are, you know, what you would consider to be, you know, liberal Democrat or even very, very centrist conservative.
Nick Collins still writes for them. He writes for the Spectator as well.
So anyway, the article that we're talking about, though, and we'll link it in the show notes, by the way.
Yeah, the long read.
It's a long read. It's a very good read. Very interesting, but it might make you very angry, or I don't know. That's why I said earlier, I don't know what to make of this. Anyway, it's about the subject of what to do with the physical landscape when the political landscape changes. And by that, I mean, here in Poland and elsewhere in this part of Europe, you know, streets were named after people and events related to communism, Soviet communism, the Polish communist structure, statues, various landmarks. And a lot of the street names were changed a long time ago, but the statues still remain. And here and there are incidents where people deface statues erected during the communist era, or there are movements to have them physically destroyed. Is this controversial? Is it right? I don't know. Where do Dave weighed in on
Well, the
this?
government are systematically have a plan to get rid of the last remnants, decommunisation, finish it off. I believe there's plans to fill a nuclear bunker site with these statues and make it a kind of exhibition to the kind of horrors.
Oh, these are the nuclear bunkers that the Russians claimed never existed.
Yes, the very same ones. I mean, you'd read this.
Oh, that bunker. Oh, sorry. I thought you were talking about other bunkers.
I would urge our listeners abroad not to read this article all the way to the bottom and consider this some huge fiery debate in Poland whether the legacy of communism is a good one or not. It's pretty one-sided one to me.
No, is it one-sided? Wait, is it one-sided? I mean, is it that easy where,
Is there mass protests about the removal of these statues? I don't think so.
If there's a statue
it's a big deal
erected during the
Russia,
communist era, is it a simple matter of just getting rid of it because the era is gone?
No, I wouldn't say that.
You just said it's a
the article is written
issue.
from this weird perspective, a pro-Russian perspective in my eyes completely, where he's talking solely from the Russian point of view is, well, why don't you feel more grateful for us saving you from the Nazis? Right. You know why we don't feel more grateful. Do we really have to get into it? Right. Now, the issue of what to actually do with the statues, fair enough. I'm not. I've lived right beside one. Most of the time, I've lived in Krakow. It never bothered me. I mean,
exactly. It's a good example. The one that's close.
Dublin
to
is full of statues of what you could, some left wingers would consider conquerors and right. oppressors. They're just bloody statues. Who cares?
A second. Again, I mean, we're not talking about necessarily a statue of Lenin or Marx or something glorifying.
Yeah,
communism.
they're statues and generally of soldiers who liberated the country.
Maybe they're commemorating the dead. Right? They're commemorating the dead, of which there were 20 million, 10 million in uniform, 10 million civilians. I'll take the devil's advocate position here. I'm a a Russian citizen today, and 20 million of my countrymen were put through the meat grinder, and the people in Poland are pulling down the monuments that are commemorating that blood sacrifice. How am I supposed to feel about that? I don't want them to celebrate communism necessarily, but come on.
Well, I mean, a few statues maybe in the correct place. I don't know. It
is messy subject.
Yeah, well, I don't think it's that clear. I mean, these statues were built way later, and they were continued to be built right up to the 80s.
Some of them, yeah.
And they got more and more elaborate. And there's no doubt the Soviet style of architecture is very much a message as well, like the Soviet greatness. They iron out a lot of the creases in history here. And rather than getting up on my high horse, my soapbox, the Soapbox 2000, the greatest soapbox in the world, I came across a response on The Guardian, in fairness to them, from a man called Christopher Saitero, was it? And I'm going to have Josh read it out. It might take a couple of minutes, but I think this guy put it very, very well.
This is a response to the Guardian article.
Yes, it is a response to the Guardian article, which I was not a big fan of for many of the reasons that Christopher is about to elucidate.
Okay, so the letter goes as follows. Matthew Luxmore's article, Poles Apart, The Bitter Conflict Over a Nation's History, The Long Read, 13th July, contains a gross error likely to lead readers to misunderstand the Soviet Union's true intentions during the Second World War. There were 1.5 million Poles deported to Siberia, not hundreds of thousands, as the article states, with no mention of their fate. They were forcibly taken from their homes in eastern Poland to gulags, most died of starvation and disease under forced labour. To misrepresent this suffering, which took place on a colossal scale, is a crime akin to Holocaust denial. My grandfather was one of the few who survived. To him and his contemporaries, the hostile Soviet invaders' motivation was not liberation, but conquest. Any such conquest is more successful if it has collaborators, which explains the motivations of the highly selective sample of people cited in the article. It should be clearly stated that the Soviets and Nazis had agreed jointly invade and carve up Poland. When Hitler went back on the deal, they fought each other for control of Poland. The Soviets won, and history was rewritten by the winners. They did this with decades of deceit propagated through the Polish school system, denying not just the Katyn massacre, but also the bravery of those who, like my grandfather, fought at Monte Cassino, the 1st Armoured Polish Division, which won critical battles in the D-Day landings, and the 303 squadron pilots who made all the difference in the Battle of Britain. These were disgracefully branded traitors by the puppet government of post-war Poland, installed by Stalin in a brazen breach of the agreement reached at Yalta. Presenting the Soviet loss of 600,000 liberators as noble made my stomach churn as it would every single one of the many Polish people I know. It was a price Stalin was prepared to pay for the hostile invasion and 45-year subjugation of a sovereign state of more than 30 million people. I strongly suggest the author educate himself on the true facts. I recommend the excellent work Trail of Hope by Professor Norman Davis and the Sikorsky Museum in London. The present-day nationalist backlash is a result of decades of communist lies and brainwashing. Unfortunately, such an aggressive attempt to erase the communist past is likely to ratchet up tensions and make conflict more likely. Much better to let these monuments decay naturally, to symbolise the decline and fall of the aggressively imperialistic but inherently rotten and mendacious USSR. Christopher Citera, Cambridge.
Oh, nicely read, Josh. Nicely read. Thanks for that. One last thing before we go here. Sunday shopping law came into effect a few months ago. Have you kind of internalized this now, or are you used to not shopping on the, what is it, the first and third, or the second, the middle, or the last? What the hell is it?
I've been tamed by the man mightily easily, I have to say. There's a Żabka open near me.
Wait, it's open first and last, or closed first and last? I still don't know what the hell's going on.
It's 12 to 6.
I find the whole thing really, really annoying. If I just knew that they were always closed on Sundays, that would almost be better.
I'm pretty sure it's open.
Which, of course, I guess is the sort of, the boiling the frog slowly kind of
I'm pretty sure it's open
here.
First and last, closed on all others. I think.
But actually, even finding a kind of a straightforward website which had, I found a website which had wrong information as I trotted down to Biedronka with my hopeful carrier bag and discovered that it was shut. Yeah. Yes.
Well, anyway,
nothing but a pocket full of dreams.
Back in the news this week.
Yeah.
Back in the news this week because the government has moved to close a bit of a loophole that was being exploited. I think we mentioned this on a show some time ago. Okay. There was a loophole that allowed stores like Żabka and Fresh Market and little neighborhood stores to be open if they designated themselves as like a postal pickup place, like a place where you can go to get packages that were left.
Pickup postman
for you by the postman when you were away or something like that. So if they were a package pickup place, they could also be open to conduct business and sell their other things that started with the letter P, like pierogies and Pepsi and all the rest of it,
and pepper.
Anyway,
preservatives.
So it was an unwelcome work around the law. The government moved to pass some legislation to outlaw this, and apparently it's effective beginning of next year. So they were quick to pass the law, but for some reason the law doesn't come into effect for another 6 months. So beginning in January 2019, definitely closed unless you take advantage of another remaining loophole, which is to be the proprietor of the shop. If you are the owner, the proprietor, you can operate the store yourself on those otherwise closed Sundays.
Tell me this, how long has this law been in place now?
Since March.
I've been completely tamed already to the point, and this is pathetic, that when I walk outside my house and I noticed that Galeria is open with all the shops open on Sunday, I got all excited and went in and like a good little worker drone and spent my money. And did I also see a link that retail sales are actually way up?
They are.
How does that work?
They
lose a day?
Say retail sales are up like 10% last year, year on year. So
I was
are these government statistics, or are they?
Somebody's stats. It's on the internet. It can't be wrong.
Right. Fair
No, it's from GUS, the Central Statistical Office, the Polish acronym, unfortunately named GUS. 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 Yeah.
Okay. Zeus is less cool.
I think it's a reflection of rising incomes
Zeus
and
for the
rising
goose and all of
prosperity.
that.
Generally, nothing to do with being closed on. The sales generally are not flat, which is kind of a point in favor of the people making the argument for keeping the stores closed on Sundays. The sales are even or rising just on 6 days instead of 7.
I was surprised to say that. I'm just admitting it. I'm just being honest.
People, there's a rush on Saturday night and Monday morning, I guess, making up for the loss on Sundays. So
I just don't understand retail microeconomics.
Have you taken advantage of the law to go to church, Josh, to get back in the faith?
I did pass by a church a few weeks ago.
You live in the centre of the city, dude. They're everywhere. No, I haven't got particularly religious either, John. No.
Wasn't that the whole point, to spend more time with your family, or I don't know?
I always spend Sunday with my family anyway.
Yeah. Okay,
My family are in England.
We don't need the law.
Or Australia. So.
Oh well.
Unless Liverpool are playing, then I'm there. But not really there.